into the ED and fell in love with it. And I thought that that was, common for a lot of people. And then talking to others, they didn't like the vibe of the ED. They didn't like how it was run, the sort of flow of the ED. So I think early exposure is definitely important. I would also say, just in terms of what you should be thinking about, like honing down on a specialty, obviously like what you want your lifestyle to be like, what kind of conditions you want to be dealing with, the patient populations you want to be dealing with. And I think it's hard to tell when you're a student, but like trying to figure out how you actually do handle stressful situations, and how that's going to affect you like personally long term.
Okay, so pretty much I agree with everything everyone has said so far, and really don't have too much to add. So definitely, I agree with the early exposure. Make sure you're networking. And one thing too, I would probably say is just definitely look at all the pros and cons, like of EM, because I guess one thing to consider that I had some people sort of bring up to me is they were trying to balance out, like if they thought they would feel complete without having that, I guess, sort of patient follow-up, because it's something you're probably not going to get in the ED.
Okay, thank you. Our next question regards research. How important was research in your residency application and in the interview process?
I can start this one off. So I'm not a research girl. And I think that for me, it's sort of like the interview process will sort of ask you about research as much as you are interested in research. I didn't get any, I think I got a few questions about one research project I was very interested in, because I think they could tell I was interested in it. But in general, I don't feel like there was any, like a lot of pressure for, a lot of publications and that sort of thing.
Going off of that, I didn't have a ton of research. I had one sort of big research project throughout med school, and I think EM is a field where it's not really required to have like a long list of publications to be competitive. And when you're applying, you'll also find like there's different types of programs, academic, community, county, and their how much they sort of prioritize research will be different. But yeah.
I would agree with both Bashar and Beta. I also, I have a couple of research projects from undergrad, and then one that kind of was partially completed due to COVID, but it was not a huge factor that I found during the application interview process. I think a couple of people asked about my research, particularly just because it was a non-EM related kind of field. So people were just kind of interested in how I ended up doing something pretty different during undergrad. But I never felt that I was like disadvantaged or kind of like there was anything negative regarding any interviews or applications because I didn't have a strong research focus. That being said, definitely think about where you want to be. Some programs are just kind of set up in a more research heavy focus. So if that's where you want to be, then maybe consider having more research projects under your belt to have things to talk about and show that you have an interest in research. But again, I would agree, and I don't think that it's by any means like a requirement for EM that you have to like have 10 projects and all of these things. It doesn't hurt to show that you've dabbled, you've explored research a little bit, and it's totally okay that research isn't everybody's thing. And I think EM is a good field to kind of show that diversity of research interest or less interest.
I guess yeah, in the same vein, I if I have to answer, I would say that I mean it's not important for emergency physicians. I mean in the process, it doesn't weight as heavy as maybe your hobby or something. But for me, I would say extensive research. So I had like a lot of publications, but that didn't come up. I think it came up once, and that was like NYU because they're very into research. And it was just a casual conversation about research because it was COVID related. So it's not really a big factor. I wouldn't go and do research if you don't like research. I think it's better for you to do something very interesting. I don't know, knitting, that would be actually better than doing research. You ask you questions about knitting before they ask you about your research.
Yeah, so for me, I had a lot of research, I guess, before I came to medical school. I can't really say I did a lot while I was in medical school. And honestly, I think it probably only came up maybe like during 2 interviews, but I pretty much agree with what others have said. Like if you're passionate about doing research, go for it. But I don't think it would hurt you, like if if you only did one project.
Okay, great. I'm sure for those of us that do not like research as much, that's great news. So fantastic. How did you all prepare for your EM rotation?
And so I can start this one off. So one thing I did was I guess I tried to make sure I definitely looked over, like differentials for, different scenarios for things, because it's definitely something you're gonna have to be prepared to do and explain and give like orders kind of like for what you would do in different situations during your rotation. But I will say at Howard it is a little different because we don't have a residency EM program at Howard. So we were able to kind of get our feet wet a little bit by doing a rotation through Howard before we went to our ways, and that helped too.
One thing that I really liked was the EM Clerkship podcast. If you have Spotify, they drop a lot of tips they like go through extensively how to properly present in the emergency department. And I don't know how it's structured at other schools, but at GW, EM is a 4th-year rotation. So it's like after you've learned how to present on IM and like surgery and all those other things. And there's a little bit of unlearning and learning with the EM format. So, and that also kind of went through like with these chief complaints, like these are the do not miss diagnoses you should think about, and like how to go up presenting what your proposed workup is, etc. So EM Clerkship podcast is the MVP.
There's a document I think posted published by SAEM. I think it's SAEM M4. It's written by program directors. So, and it's not long. You can actually go through it maybe 2 days before your EM rotation. So thank you so much for posting it. So yeah, he has everything, most of the complaints, and basically everything you need to know about the complaints. Yeah, so it was really helpful.
Something I tried to prepare a little bit before my EM rotations was just kind of getting myself in the mindset, particularly for presentations, on how to think about present a patient from an EM perspective, which can be quite different from a lot of other clerkships. So particularly if you're doing your EM clerkship, like early in 4th year, you've just come off of maybe like IM or psychiatry where things are done a lot differently, just kind of taking a little time to adjust my kind of thought process to how to approach an EM patient, and thinking about, in particular, if I want to do something, why do I want to do it? That's something that I think can help to kind of show that you're really thinking about your patients, is kind of thinking through why you want to do any particular thing for them. So just taking some time to look at how to present an EM patient, and some of the basic, like as other people mentioned, thinking through differentials and then how you would work up those different things. So some of the more common complaints.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted
And
to,
oh yeah, please go ahead.
because there's something. So when I started on my EM rotation, like the presentation was so different. I feel like something that I picked up later is that, I mean, the way you present is you're trying to like lead the attending to a diagnosis. So you're telling your story according to what you think the patient has. And most of the time I would just present and basically like hoping that give him everything and then, okay, they decide, but they want you to tell you, okay, what do you think this patient has and what do you want to do for them? Yeah.
Also on the topic of presentations, I found it very helpful for my, like the growth of my presentation to get like almost constant feedback from my attendings. And on my home and away rotation, I would sort of like halfway through the shift, ask my attending, like, how am I doing? You know, I really want to like perform well. Like, what are things like that you think I can do to get there? And even if you don't even change within that shift, like you asking that question and just like on a very, very basic level, starting to apply what they said, like they're gonna see that like, you know, you took feedback and I did actually like improve a lot. So I think that was a big thing for me.
Okay, thank you. And I failed to mention earlier, but for those that are listening, if you have a follow-up question you would like to ask, please drop it in the chat and I can share it with our panel, or you can save it for the end of the discussion for our Q&A. And now you just mentioned away rotations. The next question is about away rotations. What factors did you consider when you considered your away rotations, and what would you change about your away rotations?
I would say for me, you know, I think our class in particular might have had a bit of a different experience for away rotations than future classes probably will, just because of kind of the tumultuous months preceding our window for aways, and kind of some changes in the expectations for doing them, not doing them, and only being able to do one. So just kind of setting the stage in that regard. For me personally, some of the factors I was looking at for an away rotation were, of course, programs that I was interested in. So programs that I would be considering applying to, because that essentially is, if you are applying to that program, that's your quote audition rotation, where you can kind of show them who you are as a student and budding provider. And then some other factors for me, just personally, like location wise, somewhere that was kind of going to be feasible to get to and to stay at for that amount of time. I was also interested in seeing a different setting than where you know, I'm at here at GW in a very urban setting. So I wanted to see a different type of ED setup and different kind of operating system, I guess, so to speak. So those are some of the things that I looked at.
We can't forget stipend. So that was a factor. I mean, these things are expensive. So, and some people are afraid to go to the number one because they're like, okay, I mean, it's a big interview. They're gonna see my flaws and everything. I mean, people are debating about that, but I mean, I feel like you're gonna work hard anyway. So, you know, why don't you just go there and, you know, do your best. So that's my take on that. And yeah, the city, you know, making sure, I mean, if you like the city, that was a factor, or if you thought you would like the city. Like I like a program and I wanted to know if I like the city. So I went there and I realized that I didn't like the city. So that was an eye-opening for me.
I definitely agree that you should sort of pick your way based on, like, even if it's your number one. You are going to make a fool of yourself at any program, like, once or twice. So I think it's really, really important to, like you're saying, like, get a feel for the program. I did mine at UC San Diego, which was like my top. And then I realized that I didn't like it. And at first, I was kind of bummed about it, but I'm, in retrospect, very, very happy that I did my way there because, it informs your rank list. So.
So yeah, definitely choose a place, we may be interested in, no matter if it's like your 1, 2, or 3, feel like, you're going to learn a lot while you're rotating through. For me, I definitely looked at like if there was stipends or if there was a rotating student like scholarships, just because they definitely were expensive, to be like in a city or a place for, like a month or so. But yeah, I pretty much agree with what everyone else said.
Okay, thank you. And regarding away rotations, how did you prepare for them from a medical standpoint, from the education? Did you do anything different compared to your home rotations?
I mean, the only thing I can add is that I came earlier than, because so it's like when you're on your away rotation, everybody's looking at you. I mean, it's basically your month-long interview. So I was the most friendly person. I was friendly to everybody. I mean, I'm friendly normally, but yeah, I was extra friendly to everybody. I was on my P's and toes, basically. Like I was coming early, staying late, and doing what I had to do, basically, and extra. Yeah.
I made sure to know the program pretty well so that when I was working with different attendings, working with different residents, I could have kind of informed conversations, ask them questions, show that I was interested in the program. I had already learned a lot about it and that there were more things I wanted to know. So I made that a point before my first shift to just really know the program well as much as I could from the information that was out there.
Okay, so for me, I would say definitely being proactive. I tried to make sure I was a little more proactive at my away, institutions, whether that's, like if there's like an ultrasound that can be done, like offering to, like do that, whatever you can to, be more hands-on or to go move the patient if, things look like they're, like things are being slowed down, like in the ED. So I would definitely say try to be as proactive as you can.
And then sort of on that note, if they invite you to like journal club or conference or whatever it is they do with the residents, even like social events with the residents, that they might say it's optional, just take it as like mandatory to show that you're interested. And it is genuinely a good way to know if you fit in with the rest of the residents, and how you would feel working with those colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the application process. What advice do you have for the ERAS application?
Started as early as possible. Make sure you guys are on your recommenders. Like I guess I can't emphasize enough. Like pretty much like the earlier you kind of get things moving, the better. Just in case like in case you need to follow up like on a recommendation or you want someone to like look over your personal statement. So just start as early as you can.
In the same vein, I think even if you're not ready to start, you can find an ERAS sample. Like you need to know what goes into ERAS. as early as possible. I think that would be very helpful. So if you can find some sample online, or just so you know what's supposed to go in and how heavy I mean, like filling out all these questions is.
I definitely agree. I think that's the biggest thing because the application itself is not complicated. So it's really just like a scramble towards the end. I wrote my personal statement like that summer, and you're going through many rounds of edits, and then a lot of my friends sort of started very late, and I was just so thankful that it was out of the way.
The one page essay, the one page personal statement, everybody's saying it, you need to keep it under one page. This is very, I don't know why they want it under one page. I mean, I feel like, ED docs have the smallest attention span. So they want it under one page. If you can't get it yourself, give it to somebody, like maybe an attending or something, they're gonna cut and, just give you what's important just to keep.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say personal statement wise, I would personally recommend kind of just setting a day kind of pretty early on and just write something, even if it's terrible, just give yourself somewhere to start. Let it be for a little while, a week or two, then go back and look at it and get a real sense for, hey, I actually kind of liked this, or oh, this was awful, I want to change this, or oh, this reminds me of something else I want to put in. Like, even if it's terrible, just get something written. I feel like kind of the hardest part is getting something on paper. You can always go back and like change a word here or there, or decide that you want to add or take something out. But like I feel like that hardest step is just getting something written. So if you can kind of get past that first step, I think it makes it easier down the road to have something to work from.
I would also just add to make sure that you're kind of on top of your admin related things. Like, I had an issue where there was a grade in my transcript that was wrong, and I kind of had to really be proactive about getting that fixed. So make sure that you like check everything, make sure you like have your step scores and like easy things like that all set, because during like the rush where like the day before, things take longer to get uploaded. So just have all that done before.
She said something about step score. I had a horror story. So I think my step 2 score came the day or the day after ERAS open, and I didn't know I had to go back and send it to everybody. So 2 weeks later, I think that I'm like, oh, I'm not getting interviews. What's going on? And one of my mentors, he texts me like, oh, did you take steps? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, but I don't see it here. So I had to go and find out that, oh, I have to send it. So after I sent it, then I think like it kind of unlocked stuff. And I had to email people, oh yeah, I just submitted my my step 2 and everything. So that kind of unlocked a lot of stuff. So making sure you know all these technicalities and how to go about ERAS.
I saw someone asked in the chat about resources for writing a personal statement. And this might be a little bit of a controversial answer, but I personally tried to avoid resources regarding a personal statement. I didn't really want to be influenced too much by someone saying you have to do it this way or do it that way, because I felt like if I looked at too many different resources, I would kind of lose my voice that I wanted to have in my statement. So I'm sure there are many other ways to approach the statement, but for me personally, I found the best thing was just to get something written down how I would want to just talk about myself. And then I guess the main resource I used was my advisor, who just kind of back and forth, read different drafts, and kind of gave me another person that could help with revising. But I tried to keep outside resources kind of minimal just for me personally.
I see a question in the chat about how many hours per week were we putting into ERAS during the month of August. I actually tried to get my personal statement, which for me, I thought would be the toughest or like most or the longest part out of the way before August, just because I was on my away rotation at that time. So I would try to finish that prior to August. And then I was spending like maybe 3 to 4 hours a week on like getting my resume and all of that stuff together.
Does anyone have any other thoughts regarding either of those questions? They're both great questions about the resources they use for their personal statement or the number of hours you put into your ERAS application.
I didn't record any hours, but sometimes I would tell myself, okay, I'm sitting on this thing until like I finish maybe one section, and I'll force myself to do it until, you know, I'm like, okay, I can't do it anymore, and then I stop, and then, you know, go about my day or whatever I have to do. So I had to basically force myself, because you always procrastinate, and I'll do it later. So you're probably gonna need some discipline, and, you know, so that you can get over it. And like Victoria said, I didn't want any influence from the outside, because when you read something, you know, you tend to just like follow it. So, and sometimes I'll be driving and an idea will come, I'll just pull over and write it down. Or like, you know, you just go through life and then like, oh my, I need to talk about this, and you stop and you write it down, you know. And that's how I built my personal statement.
Also, just for personal statements, I would say like avoid cliche statements as much as possible, which is very hard to do, but almost all my attendings, that was like their one piece of advice, because they're reading so many of these. So I agree, like also not looking at examples, because those are just filled with like cliche statements that you're going to pull into your own, and just makes you stand out less.
If you can find someone who in some way or another is involved with reviewing personal statements, like from applicants from year to year, even just as kind of like a couple of different people that are reviewing your statement, they might be able to give a good perspective from someone who's looked at a lot of different personal statements. So if you can find someone either at your institution or at an away rotation or whatever it might be, to give that perspective, that might be helpful.
Okay. And the only other thing I was going to add was, so the only thing I do remember sort of searching on the internet was, I looked at the sort of the do's and the don'ts of like personal statements. So that may be something like good to either ask somebody about or to search, because there was some pretty good lists that I saw, and it was actually when Asher said that like don't include cliches, actually reminded me of that.
Okay, great. Another ERAS question for you all. What advice do you have for the hobby section of ERAS specifically? I've heard some different schools of thought.
I feel like the more absurd your hobby, the better. Because especially in EM, I feel like it's always like, I like hiking, I like camping, I like running. Like if you knit, like Abdul said, like put just like the weirdest thing that you like, because yeah, we all got asked about our hobbies so much, and it really just like connects you to your interviewer.
Yeah, I would agree. Programs really want to know who you are. Your personal statement gives a kind of a window into who you are academically and like as a provider, but your hobby section really lets them kind of see who you are as a person. I like the number of different things I heard throughout the interview trail of just like things that people had put in their hobby section. I just like things I couldn't even like come up with if I tried. So just like anything that might like make you stand out a little bit from, everyone has some of the same background experiences, but anything that might set you apart a little bit on a personal level. Like, don't be afraid. Like, if you think it's a weird hobby, like somebody else probably has that same weird hobby and they might want to have a 10-minute conversation with you about it during your interview. So don't be afraid to like set yourself apart and kind of like have a little more fun with the hobby section. ERAS seems very kind of like cold and like formal, but like the hobby section is really your chance to kind of do something a little different, use whatever type of like writing style you want to kind of get across what's interesting to you.
So I definitely agree. Don't be afraid to list like any crazy hobbies you have. So for example, for mine, like I actually listed, that I was into Japanese culture and watching anime, and I actually got asked about that in probably nearly every interview I had. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think all of my interviews, somebody talked about comedy. I mean, I used to stand up and soccer, like we played soccer. So like everybody, all of them ask at every interview, it was about that. And maybe the whole conversation, they didn't even ask me about like anything else, like why I like EM. It was just about like, oh yeah, we can put you in on the team here, like we need a player or something. Like, so it was really it was really interesting.
Okay. Another question regarding personal statements. Did any of you have different personal statements for urban programs compared to less urban programs?
I didn't have differences for urban programs, but I'm from California and I really, really wanted to go back. And so for my California programs, I had a completely different personal statement that was, targeted towards that.
Any other thoughts about urban versus non-urban personal statements?
Not necessarily about that, but just the fact that you can select what program you send. Literally anything you submit on ERAS, you can just select what program you want them to go. So, and that goes for letters of recommendations, and I think basically even pictures. So that's something, and it goes back to being like learning how to navigate ERAS. They have videos online. Just make sure you know how to navigate ERAS.
Okay. Another question that I got in the chat was, does EM on average review applications more holistically than other specialties, or are there more specific areas they think more highly of than others? We already talked about research not being used as a deciding factor. So is it more holistic? Is it less holistic? What are your thoughts?
So I would like to think it's more of a holistic approach. I mean, I genuinely feel like programs were more interested in getting to know me as a person versus sort of just like picking out like, oh, well, like how did you do in STEP, or or how much research do you have? So that's one thing I liked about my interview experience.
I would definitely agree. I think EM doesn't put a like complete emphasis on any one like category of an application. So if you're worried that, maybe you don't have the most research, or maybe you haven't done the most volunteering, or whatever it might be, I think that EM really looks at more at your strengths than what's missing. So they look at the things in your application that that are interesting that you've done, or that you've done really well at, or I think they look at the strengths more than like they're looking to just check off a list. So they're just looking to see that you have like a demonstrated interest in emergency medicine, and you have like a personal understanding of why you want to be in emergency medicine, and then that you're like a person that they want to interact with for 3 or 4 years. More than that, they're looking to see that you had like perfect SEP scores, or, you know, whatever those like check boxes could be.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, I have a question, actually, I have a personal question. How important was the volunteering you did in medical school in your interviews? And do you think it played a role in helping you match?
You said volunteering before medical school?
Volunteering during medical school, because I've heard that it's not as important as it may be supposedly be, but now the step one is pass fail. Is it more important now, maybe? But what are your thoughts?
So I would say that it's very, I mean, my personal opinion, it's very important. I think that not necessarily volunteering, but just they want to know that you're a genuine person, that you care, you know. So a lot of my questions came about the things that I do outside of the classroom, and basically outreach programs that I'm in. So a lot of my questions came from my volunteering activities, and I think that's what they were interested in. So I would say that it's very important.
I agree. My personal volunteering experience is maybe a little bit different or unique. I don't know. I volunteered as an EMT throughout medical school, so that was a big thing that I got asked about, just because it's both volunteering, but it's also within the field. So for me, that's something that came up at like every single interview. With every single interviewer wanted to know more about that. I think if you're able to find volunteer opportunities that are related to EM, it kind of serves a dual purpose of showing that you've kind of, you know, you've done things to give back to the community, but also that you have looked for opportunities to be involved in EM. I think programs want to know that you know what you're getting yourself into. You didn't just wander into the ED one day, you had a good shift and decided you wanted to do EM. They want to know that you've really like considered what being an ED physician means, and that's one way that you can show that.
I agree. I would just add that I think it's more about like quality over quantity. I was asked about like being on MSC like over and over, and then this like one other like culinary medicine thing that I had done, because I guess I spoke about it passionately in my ERAS, and they can tell, and then they want to know about it, but I wasn't like, you know, tell us about, you know, the breadth of your volunteering activities. So just finding something that you really like and going with that.
How do you all go about ranking your programs?
Ranking can be a challenge, and I think it's very personal in terms of like what factors each person puts into their rank list. So kind of what has more weight for one person might have a different weight for somebody else. So maybe, you know, geography is very important for somebody who really wants to be in a particular area. Maybe somebody else is open to going wherever, and maybe, you know, cost of living is a bigger factor, or, you know, like there are a million different factors that you could consider, but I think it's important. I would recommend maybe even before interviews start, kind of think about the things that are important to you and just like write out a list, and that can kind of help to guide how you get information during the interview process. So like, are there things that you haven't heard about a program that you want to ask related to the things that are important to you? And then I personally made like a spreadsheet and assigned like point values to the different things that were important to me. At the end of the day, it was great for kind of figuring out programs that were at the top of my list and lower on my list. I think the hardest part for me was figuring out the middle, trying to get the programs that kind of fell into like a middle category and decide amongst those where I wanted to rank them. But that was just my experience.
I guess like Victoria said, there's so many things that go into it. I think something that we consider is the career first before, I think looking into, I'll drop a link, going through the list of the programs and see what they have to offer so that you start, because when you interview, maybe towards the middle of the interview season, you start considering different things. The things that were important to you at the beginning start shifting, and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about this, I didn't think about that. So I think looking into the programs and seeing what they have to offer, the number of hours, how many shifts do you work, how much they value wellness, and what are they focused on, like how they can take you, where they can take your career. So like there's things that will matter to you later. And like location as well, like you said, location, and the strength of the program, the name, like, and if you want to do fellowship as well. Yeah.
So for me, definitely during each interview, I sort of jotted down, things I liked or didn't like about each program. Sort of like my initial feeling like about my interview experience. And I sort of later went back and kind of made a list of like, okay, what things are important to me, and tried to sort of rank it that way.
I remember like this is more towards when rank lists were due, having trouble, like the top 3 and the bottom 3, I think were really easy, but then the middle was where I struggled a lot. And one of our deans gave me the advice to like take all those middle programs and like every day picture yourself for like a few minutes opening your match letter and seeing like that program and like how do you feel about it, and like, are you excited to move there? Are you excited to work with the residents there? About like, are you excited about what type of education and experience you're gonna get? So it can be, it sounds really cliche, but it can really come down to just gut feeling a lot of the time. And then Kritika asked about what drew me to the county experience, and for others as well, what drew you to your specific program. I would say for me, I didn't even know that much about county programs, just coming from such an academically oriented school. But I just happened to attend, it was like a Women in EM thing that Cook County had on Zoom. And then I was like in Chicago traveling and I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I would love to just like see the ED if it's possible. And they were nice enough to like let me. And I really saw a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of volume. There's a lot of sort of just learning by doing, and pushing yourself that way, and seeing a super diverse patient population that I was really attracted to. And then I think there's sort of this connotation that county programs are lacking in research, but I think that's really not the case. I think most county programs will support you if you are interested in research, if you are interested in teaching. So you can definitely get a little bit of the academic experience too. I think ultimately depends on, do you want to graduate residency with a ton of publications, versus like, do you prioritize the clinical experience? And I think for me, I really wanted to just be able to see everything there is possible to see, for the most part, in emergency medicine during residency training. And I really like procedures in emergency medicine. One of the reasons that drew me to EM in the first place, and I think county experiences are, they sort of push procedures early on, and that was another thing that I liked about it.
Okay, thank you, Veda. We only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, so I want to open it up to any of the 26 participants we have on this call. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. And while you may be typing, or you could also unmute yourself. I have a question as well to ask if no one has anything else they'd like to share.
I guess now that you guys are done with the process, is there anything you would have done differently? Especially, I'm a third year, so like, yeah, that's kind of what you would do. Is there anything you would have done differently?
I actually recently, or right before match, I was thinking about this. I really wanted to go to the program that my program was my top program. And I was like, you know what? I should have gotten to know the residents of this program more. I guess I still got in, but I feel like really even just like cold calling people, like they'll give you their contact info, but you can get to know residents way more outside of like the happy hours, the virtual happy hours, and they'll, like most all of them will talk to you very honestly about their experience. And I think that would be the one thing that I would have done differently.
Something I would have done differently is I was involved with my home EM interest group, but not on paper, right? So I think maybe, trying to get a position throughout your medical school curriculum would be good, because they want to see that you're interested either at the local level or just at your school level. So because they want to see that you're genuinely interested in emergency medicine.
I see a question about step 2 timing. I personally took it right before my home EM rotation. So for us, that was like right after third year, and EM was my first fourth year rotation. And I liked that timing because having the step 2 knowledge fresh in your mind really helps for EM. And I think I would have regretted sort of waiting to take step 2.
I agree. I also took step 2, like the immediate, like few weeks right after my last third year rotation. I took those 3 or 4 weeks off for dedicated and just studied and got step 2 out of the way. I felt like that was the time I was going to be most prepared, having just come off of clinicals from third year. And I felt like if I had pushed it, I would have just like slowly kind of like lost some of the clinical sense and trying to schedule like a better time where I wasn't trying to do more electives or things to get done before transcripts were sent out for ERAS. For me, that just felt like the good sweet spot of having just finished third year, but kind of those couple of weeks before fourth year really got started worked well for me.
So I took mine in the beginning of fourth year. So for us, it was a little different because we wanted to get our sort of home, well, for those Howard students who did do like the home rotation, which you can't get a slow for. So we literally had to jump right in like almost immediately after third year. So I ended up still doing mine pretty early on, but just doing fourth year.
One thing I would say, timing wise, now that step one is pass fail, it's likely that step two is going to be a bigger factor in kind of the overall evaluation of your application. So I think traditionally step two has been like significantly shorter dedicated period for a lot of people compared to what, for us, step one dedicated was. But I would say just kind of think about your overall layout of your schedule and make sure you're giving yourself enough time to really study and prepare for step two. Don't try to like rush it, because without a score for step one, step two is probably going to become a bigger factor than it might have previously been.
And you want to give yourself enough time. For me, I wanted to take it right at the beginning of fourth year. Like we said, we didn't have a dedicated time because we did our home EM. So I wanted to take it afterwards, but I didn't feel ready. So I had enough time to push it back and make sure it comes out. And I guess before they open the application. I mean, it came. My calculation didn't. It came out like the day they opened it. So I think you should give yourself enough time, so that if you have to push it back, you have time. And just questions. Do questions. I think that wasn't addressed, but just do as many questions as you can until you can't no more.
And so I know Victoria kind of emphasized this, but I definitely think it's going to be a bit more trickier for you guys, like since step one is pass fail now, so step two is definitely going to be more important. And while you guys do definitely want to take time, I'm also curious, like how, like pretty much how soon, like are they going to be offering interviews, and with until they have that step two score now?
Okay, well, it is now 8:01. So as promised, we will conclude. But I just want to thank all of you for your comments and your questions and your time. I personally learned a ton. I was taking notes the whole time in the background. So thank you all. Panelists, if you are comfortable, feel free to put your emails in the chat. And maybe others could reach out and ask follow-up questions. I know that's super helpful for us younger students. Look out for future events from the DCEM Medical Student Council. And again, congrats to our panelists, and everyone have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. That was great.
Hey, thanks guys. You were fantastic.